Helping out doesn't mean giving you $100,000. My wife's Aunt Louise is a great lady. She and her husband lived in the San Francisco Bay Area and bought their home in the late 1970s. After her husband passed a few years ago, she sold her home for over $1 million and moved back to live closer to her family where she grew up, farming areas in Southern California. She's now in her late 60s. Aunt Louise had 3 children, who are now all in their 40s. The 2 oldest are nice, normal people. Her youngest, Kay, though, is a real piece of work. She meets all the criteria for a psychological diagnosis of narcissism. This is just one of literally dozens of stories I could tell. First, some backstory about Kay's husband, Pedro. He was a good provider. About 10 years ago, things began going well, and he began making pretty good money. To Kay, however, higher income meant more spending, and soon she was buying a new car every 2 years. They went on cruises, she had all the latest and greatest gadgets. As the old MTV tagline used to go, too much is never enough. To augment her lifestyle, she would routinely run to her mum, Aunt Louise, with a sob story or another. We don't know the true figure, but I've heard rumors that Aunt Louise has given her more than $20,000 over the past few years. Kay and Pedro managed to keep their heads above water, but when COVID hit and the state of California ordered economic shutdown, money became tight. Then, in October, the company went out of business. Pedro found another job, but was essentially starting his career over. Naturally, they'd begun fighting about money. And 2 weeks ago, it came to a head. After hearing the blasphemous word no one time too many, Kay announces she's getting a divorce. Being California, she naturally expected the courts were going to give her one last payday from this poor guy. Her car, their house, his 401k, and generous alimony. However, in her greed, she forgot that Pedro had kept draining his 401k to pay off credit cards, and all those papers about the house she was signing every couple of years was to refinance their house to pay off more credit cards. So there was almost no equity. And with having to start his career over, alimony wasn't going to be that great. So Kay does what she always does and goes running to her mother, Aunt Louise. Aunt Louise is naturally sympathetic and urges Kay to try and reconcile, but failing that, she might be able to help her out. Literally 2 hours later, Kay texts Aunt Louise with a photo of a pricey condo and asks for $100,000 to cover her down payment and cost to furnish it. Aunt Louise naturally pushes back, telling Kay that helping out didn't mean $100,000. She'd meant letting Kay live with her for a while she got back on her feet, writing a check for security deposit and first month's rent, and maybe helping with some car payments, not $100,000. But at this point, Kay totally flips out. Here are the things my wife said were direct quotes. I'm getting these third hand, so they might be slightly off. "I can't believe my own mother would be so selfish. What difference does $100,000 make? You're not going to spend it all anyway." Meaning before Aunt Louise, her mother dies. Just sell some stocks or something. Aunt Louise fortunately does have someone who manages her money, but she stays on a strict allowance. After Aunt Louise held out, Kay has begun polluting Facebook with passive-aggressive messages about finding out people's true colors. My wife is actually hoping she calls to ask for help, specifically so she can let her have it with both barrels. So let me get this straight, right? This woman, Kay, has already leached off her mum for, $20,000 in the past few years, but that's not enough. As a fully grown adult, you need to ask your mother for more money. So how about $100,000 on a down payment just because you spend too much money on credit cards? And let's be honest, probably very fancy stuff that is not necessary. As OP said in this story, you can never have too much for Kay. Clearly, wow. $100,000 just like, yeah, can you pay me that? Because I've got no money left because I spent it all. That's mental. I guess planes would wait for their passengers in those days. This is a story that takes place during my retail days in the big blue box. A lady comes up to our counter and says she wanted RAM installed. I quoted her the price for the RAM and the install. I don't remember the price of the hardware, but it was likely expensive, since it was DDR and the service was roughly $40. First, she has a hissy fit over the fact that we had the audacity to charge for our labor. The usual, but it's so easy for you guys, and whatnot. I explained to her that while cumbersome, her laptop is designed to be opened, and she could easily do it herself if she wanted. But either way, it takes time. This being aside from the fact that if we screw up and break something, we're basically going to have to give her a new machine. So she'd better pay something to us. Either way, look, she was going to have to pay. I guess once she heard the term time, she decided to complain about something else and wanted to know how long it would take us. Even though I can have it installed and tested in under 10 minutes, there were other people in line, and other people that had quick work ahead of her. So I quoted within an hour. Now the standard at the time was 24 hours, but I was just being realistic. She pitched yet another hissy fit about how I can't wait for that, and I've got to catch a plane. I offered to let her come back later next week, and I'd make sure she was priced the same price for the RAM, shouldn't be marked a different price when she got back. And she started going on about how she needed it before she left. I told her, we can't do it in this moment. We've got a line, but once it's cleared, we'll be able to get it done. Evidently though, that was the wrong answer. She finally demands the manager. I told her that's fine, but until paperwork and payment are rendered, I can't start, so it will only increase the wait time. She was fuming when the manager came by, so he took her to customer service to yell. At this point, she's already had to wait 5 minutes for him just to get there. After about 20 minutes, we get the line down, and I spend another 15 minutes getting simple hardware installs done. I think it was a network card and 2 other RAM installs. Nothing difficult, but if drivers fight or a case is designed to take 587 screws to access a slot, it can take a bit of time. Since I've already finished what needed my immediate attention, I decide to take care of other duties while my co-workers handle the other machines. I go over to customer service to pick up returns to be tested, and lo and behold, she's still there reaming out the manager. I then get a deliciously petty idea in my head, and now that it took root, I had to do it. I pass by him and make sure to tell him quite audibly, hey, I finished off with the front counter machines. I'm gonna grab and start testing these, since there isn't anything else for me to do right now. She may have been smart enough to know what I was alluding to. While she's glaring at me, I look her straight in the eye and say, in my most concerned and clearly unable to pick up on social cues customer service voice, if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about, what are you still doing here? Didn't you have to go and catch a plane? The look she gave the manager could have melted stone, and he looked at me like Wile E. Coyote right before he gets hit by a train. He later told me about how much he wishes he could throw me into a volcano, and we all had a good laugh. He also mentioned how she just kept going on about missing her flight for this. You know, the one over the service she didn't want to pay for, to install the hardware she didn't buy, that she waited for the manager to complain about, then willingly opted to complain about it for 40 more minutes instead of actually catching that flight. All of which, of course, automatically made him not believe a word she said, given there was nothing holding her there and she could have just left at any time. Yeah, to be honest guys, in my mind, there is no doubt that that flight never existed. Karen was never going to catch a plane. She just employed some weird tactic to try and get her stuff done faster and for a discount price. Entitled Mum gets mad in the men's changing room. For some context, I'm a pretty avid swimmer, and I've been looking forward to getting back to the pool now that restrictions are loosening up where I am. At the moment, they make everyone enter the pool by going through the family changing room. Then you exit through the men or women's changing room. They've staggered the swim end times, so there's not too many people in the changing rooms at once. Well, on this particular day, the kids' swimming lesson ended about 15 minutes before my open swim time finished. I suppose since there was only kids in the changing room, the entitled mum of this story decided to go into the men's changing room with her son after the swim session was over. I suppose she lost track of time because 15 minutes later, myself and a couple of other men entered the changing room. Nobody really said anything, and I didn't really think anything of it since I figured she'd be long gone by the time I get back from the showers. Well, I come back from the shower, wrapped in a towel, and she's still there, helping her son. They happen to be right next to my locker, so I decide, whatever, I'm not gonna make a big deal out of it, plus I gotta get going. So, as normal, I take off my towel and start drying off when I hear a loud gasp, and this is how the conversation goes. The entitled mum says, "Oh my god, seriously? Can't you see I'm right here?" What? I don't want to see your penis. This is the men's locker room. I'm doing you a favor by not saying anything. Well, the family changing room is closed, so you need to be respectful of the mums that need to come in here. Why not take your son to the women's changing room then? He's above the age of being allowed in the women's. Aren't you above the age of being allowed in the men's though? At this point, the entitled mum just went into pure rage. "I'm his mum. Now please, cover up." At this point, I decide to just ignore her and keep doing my own thing while she keeps giving me dirty looks the whole time. And on her way out, she says, "Next time, I'm gonna report you to the staff." Okay, crazy lady, Okay. You know what? To be completely fair to the lady in this story, there wasn't really much of an option there for her, was there? I mean, if you're going to get changed with your child, or at least supervise your child getting changed after swimming, you got to be in the room with them, and if the family change room is closed, there's not too much you can do, is there, really? I paid for this so he can do whatever he wants. Intro. So, when I was 6 or so, I started going to day camps at one of those bouncy castle places. They had 2 camps, an art camp and a robotics camp. The art was generally little kids, and the robotics camp had a registration age of 8. However, sometimes only one camp would be scheduled, and as such, kids were put into the other camp, even if it meant breaking the age rule. This occurred on one of those days. When I was 9 or 10, I can't quite remember, they had only 2 kids in art camp, both underage, both 7 if I remember correctly. They were thrown into robotics camp with me and my brother. As you may have guessed, one of them is the entitled kid in this story. It was well known that me and my brother were the fastest builders in the camp. Even the art kids knew that. So, one of the art kids, the entitled kid, ran over to our table when he came in. A few minutes pass and we begin building. Or, I should say, the entitled kid begins building. He won't let anyone else touch the pieces or instructions. We tried to build things, only for him to kick us. So, we told on him. The instructors were very nice. Their fake names in this story are Violet and Dustin. I told Dustin that the kid wasn't letting us build. So, Dustin went over and talked to him. The entitled kid, though, only said one thing. "My mum paid for this. I can do whatever I want." In response to this, he was put in timeouts for 5 minutes, during which me and my brother completed twice as much as he'd done in the past 15 minutes. He came back after the 5 minutes were up and began doing everything again. However, it was time to go bounce. At this particular place, there were 2 rooms. One had mostly slides in it, room 1, and the other was mainly challenges, room 2. Usually, the art class would go into room 1 and robotics would go into room 2. Then we would switch. However, since there wasn't any art today, we were allowed to go in both. I ran into room 1 and began climbing an absolutely massive slide they had. It's actually 2 stories high and you get going fast. To climb it, you walk up a slope, climb a ladder, walk up another slope, and you're at the top. So, I was climbing up the ladder when someone tugged on my leg. I immediately fall off the ladder and slide down the slope, which was not meant for that, so it was not a smooth slope. Now, during this fall, I looked up and saw the entitled kid laughing. In the end, my left knee was actually split open in a nasty rug burn. Of course, I go tell on the kid again. I go to Dustin and tell him what happened and show him my rug burn. He was, of course, already annoyed at the kid at this point. I think he liked easy days and went up to confront him. As he goes over there, he pulls another kid down. This is the following confrontation. Of course, it's not 100% correct, as it happened years ago, but here it is anyways. Dustin said to the kid, "Why are you pulling other kids off the slide?" He gestures at me and the girl he pulled down, who's now crying. "My mum paid for this. I can do whatever I want." No, there are rules you have to follow. If you don't follow them, we'll call your parents and they will have to come and pick you up. "But I say you won't do that and you must do whatever I want because my mum paid for this." You have one more chance, then I'm calling your parents and you're going home. "No, you won't." Dustin was done talking to the entitled kid, but he kept his eye on him. I went to room 2 and played freeze tag with a few other kids. The entitled kid didn't give us any more problems. After 30 minutes, it was time for lunch. For lunch at this place, you can either bring your own or they would order pizza from a local place. If you wanted some, then you could pay extra with the camp, or on Thursdays, pizza was free. Today was not a Thursday, so pizza wasn't free. You got 3 slices only, no seconds. Me and my brother always got pizza, and so did most of the kids. But, of course, the entitled kid's mum, now known as the entitled mum of this story, decided she was going to cheat. She didn't pack him a lunch, but also didn't pay for pizza, knowing that the kid would undoubtedly get pizza because otherwise he literally wouldn't have anything to eat. So, the kids who ordered pizza were called up to get it, and the kids who brought their own lunch began eating. But the entitled kid was just sitting at his table, all alone. Well, the other kids realized he was a jerk, without any food. He's looking at the pizza like it was his. Dustin noticed that he had nothing and went over to talk to him. "Where's your food?" "I didn't bring any." "Why not?" "My mum said I would get pizza, so give me it now." "Yeah, you're not on the list." "I can do whatever I want. My mum paid for this, remember?" she didn't pay for the pizza. Well, I'm hungry. Dustin then looks at Violet. Can you write down that we need to charge this kid's mum for pizza? I don't want to forget. Violet says, all right, and writes it down on a pink sticky note. Done. Okay, Dustin gets up, gets 3 slices of pizza, and gives them to the entitled kids. But I want 4 slices. Nope. Only 3 slices, and that is final. But you're lucky you even get pizza, so stop it, okay? Dustin then walks off to his desk. The rest of lunch was uneventful. After lunch, it was time to continue building/playing with the robots. Of course, we were only 6 steps in because the entitled kid was so slow. Dustin offers us, me and my brother, a different kit. And of course, we say yes. We finished that one in about 20 minutes. The entitled kid was still on step 7. However, he gets bored of building and decides he wants to play with the robots. Luckily though, he doesn't ask us first. Instead, he goes to a different group and just takes the robot off the table and takes it to the play area. The kids he took it from immediately complain to Violet. Violet goes to him and asks him what he's doing. The kid doesn't respond. This time, Violet tries a different approach. Did you finish your robots yet? Yes, it's right here. Are you blind? What about that one over there? She says, pointing at his robots. Well, that's theirs. He points at a group who he took the robot from. Well, they say that your robot is actually their robots. They're lying. Are you sure you're not lying? Well, it wouldn't matter if I was, because my mum paid for this, so I can do whatever I want. Violet then gets up and goes to the front desk. She tells the receptionist, I'm assuming something that I don't know, then comes back in. She tries a friendly approach one more time before looking at the kit number he had, then looking at the brain number. Not surprisingly, they didn't match, though they matched with the other group's kits. The robots were swapped back, and after about 30 more minutes, during which the entitled kid did maybe 2 more steps, it was time to do some competitions. They had maybe 4 competitions they would do, and if you won one, then you got a bopper. Basically an inflatable mallet. These competitions are only available to the older kids, the reason being that the little kids would all want a bopper. The particular competition that day was a hide and seek game, where you were trying to find an inflatable llama, if I remember correctly. Dustin went and hid it, then released us to go and find it. After about 10 minutes, I found it on one of the bouncy castles. We bounced for a little, then returned to the room to wait for pickup. While we were there, I received my bopper. It was only my first or second one, so there was no way I was giving it up. Only one kid wanted one too. Of course, it was the entitled kid. He was complaining the entire time until his entitled mother actually arrived. She apparently rushed here because she had to pay for the pizza, so she grabbed him, rather roughly I should add, and pulled him to the reception area. There was some shouting as she probably argued, no one would have eaten that pizza if my son hadn't, so I don't need to pay. Or something stupid like that. Then my mum came. My brother and I grabbed our shoes, put them on, and then we all went out. I was still carrying the bopper at this time. This is when the final encounter occurred. I had just walked out of the side room when the entitled kid saw me. He began crying again. He'd stopped when his mum was arguing with the receptionist. His entitled mum turned and asked him what was wrong. He pointed at my bopper but didn't say anything. The entitled mum saw it and realized that her son didn't have one, so she had to complain. Why did my son not get one of those? She points at my bopper. The receptionist replies, he didn't win the challenge. You can buy one over there though. She points at the wall that has boppers on it. Well, yeah, but he got one for free, so why can't my son have one too? Well, I've already told you. Give me one already. I'm so sick of this place. The kid is still crying at this point. However, I go out the door and didn't get to hear the rest of the arguments. I don't even know if the entitled mum ever paid for that pizza. On the way back home, my mum was telling me and my brother to never be a parent like that, etc, etc. And I never saw the entitled mum or her kid again. Something tells me they might have been banned from returning. Yeah, I mean, it might be a little bit cliche, but that is genuinely the most entitled thing I think I've ever heard a kid say, right? My mum paid for this, therefore I deserve it. Doesn't matter that everyone else's mums and dads in this camp also pay for them to go to the camp, enjoy it, eat the food, whatever. Or, I mean, he didn't even pay to eat the food, realistically, eat the pizza. Doesn't even matter about all that. I paid for it. My family paid for it. Therefore, I deserve it all. Me and only me. I mean, it's literally so entitled. You don't get much more entitled than that.